Hi, my name is Veronika Khashchuk, and today I would like to talk about a question I had about Don Quixote. While I was reading the book, I've always had the question, is Don Quixote mad or in fact a genius? Let me explain. Those of us taking Professor Slater's Humanities 9 class on Don Quixote know that the narrator or author of Don Quixote's story is unreliable. For example, the very first line of the book reads, "At a village of La Mancha, whose name I do not wish to remember, there lived a little while ago one of those gentlemen." The fact that the narrator does not wish to remember the real name of Don Quixote, yet continues to tell his story, makes the reader question the narrator's actual knowledge of Don Quixote's story. To the reader, it may seem that the narrator picks and chooses what he does and doesn't want to include in his story, which makes the reader question the narrator's authority and reliability. Furthermore, the narrator continues on with listing the possible names of Don Quixote, which means that he himself does not know the facts of the story, again proving that he is an unreliable source of information. Finally, the narrator mentions that there are other authors of Don Quixote's story and that he himself is relying on information he gets from these other authors. So now that we establish that the narrator is unreliable, the reader now has to decide for themselves what is true and what isn't. On page 3, the narrator describes Don Quixote as someone who has immersed himself in those romances that he spent whole days and nights over his books, and dried up to such a degree that he lost the use of his reason. Now, the narrator clearly says that Don Quixote is mad. However, I personally think otherwise. There are 3 reasons why I think Don Quixote is a genius. First, because he's very educated in the tales of chivalry. Second, with the help of his immense knowledge, he is able to convince others into believing his elaborate fantasies. Lastly, though he is unable to convince everyone into believing his nonsense, he is still able to get them to go along with his beliefs. Let's dig deeper. First of all, Don Quixote knows everything there is to know about the tales of chivalry. The narrator himself said that Don Quixote immersed himself into these tales to the point that he lost the use of his reason. However, Don Quixote proclaims, "I know who I am, and I know that I can be not only those I have mentioned, but also the 12 peers of France, and even the 9 Worthies, for my exploits would surpass all they have ever jointly or separately achieved." Also, it is important to note that Don Quixote is not reading any books during his adventures, and when all his books were burned, he still knew what a knight-errant would do. All of the tales of chivalry he ever read lived in his heart, and he was ready to bring them to life in his own life. Now, the second reason why Don Quixote is a genius is because he is able to convince others, such as Sancho Panza, that his fantasy is actually reality. All of the inns are castles, prostitutes are princesses, plus there are constant enchantments, etc. For instance, Don Quixote, like on many occasions, convinced Sancho Panza that the windmills were giants, and when he failed at defeating the giant and was forced to face the reality that they were in fact windmills, Don Quixote blames the wizard who enchanted the windmills. In any case, Don Quixote convinces Sancho that he is right and he should view things through Don Quixote's eyes. Finally, when Don Quixote is unable to convince others in believing his fantasies, he is at least able to get them to go along with his big ideas. For example, when Don Quixote was first dubbed knight, the innkeeper advised Don Quixote to always carry money and clean shirts with him on his sallies. However, he did not just say, "You should carry these things with you," but instead he said that when a knight didn't have a squire, then the knight had to carry the necessities for traveling. Thus the innkeeper went along with Don Quixote's grand beliefs and not only dubbed him knight, but also gave him valuable advice. Another such example is seen when the barber comes and accuses Don Quixote of stealing his basin. Those present at the inn supported Don Quixote in saying that it is not a barber's basin, but a helmet. Though everyone has his or her own motive for going along with and supporting Don Quixote, I still believe that it is pretty impressive that Don Quixote is able to rally up support for what he believes to be true. That is, he is a knight-errant on a quest. Thank you for watching, and I'm sorry I'm so nervous. Bye.